7 Tonight Show guests who walked on completely high. The Tonight Show's famous blue curtain slides open. Johnny Carson steps into the light, lands his monologue, and settles behind the desk. Night after night, for 3 decades, this ritual unfolded with near-military precision. Reliable, familiar, comforting. But behind that polished machine was a reality viewers almost never saw. A backstage world filled with nerves, chaos, and celebrities who sometimes arrived in shockingly altered states of mind. Johnny could tell instantly, revealed a former Tonight Show producer who worked closely with Carson throughout the 1970s. The moment a guest walked out, he knew. Drunk, high, coked up, worse, you'd see it in his eyes. Half amused, half thinking, oh boy, here we go. On camera, Carson was unflappable. Off camera, the production team was constantly preparing for disaster. Assistants were trained to spot warning signs. Producers had backup segments ready. Network executives hovered nervously just out of sight. We even had code signals, a longtime staffer explained. If Johnny touched his tie during an introduction, it meant the guest wasn't sober. If he straightened his cards twice, the director knew to keep shots tight. No wide angles because anything could happen. It was an entire silent language built over years to manage something audiences at home would never imagine. Major celebrities arriving at America's most prestigious talk show chemically altered. The 70s were wild, the producer admitted. Oscar winners, music legends, literary icons. People so impaired they barely knew where they were. And Johnny still had to make it look effortless. In one case, a beloved cultural icon was so obviously under the influence that NBC executives considered cutting the interview mid-broadcast, until Carson convinced them viewers would assume it was all part of the act. Another guest was so chemically enhanced that Carson later joked backstage, "I think I got a contact high just sitting next to him." Tonight, we're revealing the most infamous Tonight Show appearances where guests were clearly high, and how Johnny Carson masterfully handled moments that could have derailed careers or the show itself. But first, we need to understand why so many stars turned to substances before sitting across from television's most powerful interviewer. The green room, where anxiety met chemistry. The Tonight Show green room may have seen more pre-show panic than any space in television history. People don't understand the pressure, explained a former talent coordinator. A great Carson appearance could change your life overnight. A bad one could follow you forever. And Johnny didn't like scripted answers. He wanted real conversation. That terrified people. That fear-fueled chemical courage. The Green Room bar was legendary. Fully stocked. Top shelf. Personally approved by Carson himself. The unofficial rule was 1 drink was okay, a staffer recalled. 2 was pushing it. But try enforcing that with major stars. Beyond alcohol, the era's relaxed attitude toward drugs meant guests often arrived already medicated. Marijuana, cocaine, pills, or combinations that became painfully obvious once the cameras rolled. This was the Studio 54 era, noted a television historian. Rock stars lived like emperors. Cocaine was everywhere. The Tonight Show reflected the culture, including its excesses. Carson himself enjoyed a drink but always maintained control on air. That contrast became critical when interviewing guests who didn't. Johnny adjusted instantly, his former producer explained. A little buzzed? He guided them gently. Truly impaired? He simplified everything, shorter questions, faster exits, while making it seem completely natural. That ability would be tested again and again, starting with a comedian who made chemical enhancement part of his identity. George Carlin, the functioning stoner. By the early 1970s, George Carlin had transformed from clean-cut comic into counterculture icon. Long hair, sharper material, and a visible relationship with marijuana. He riffed like a genius and smiled like a stoner, remembered a longtime camera operator. He wasn't hiding anything. That glaze in his eyes? It was part of the brand. Carlin appeared on The Tonight Show more than 130 times and became one of Carson's most trusted guests. Yet, despite that closeness, Carson never asked him to guest host. Johnny loved George, a former writer explained, but reliability mattered. He respected George's brilliance. just didn't trust the lifestyle enough to hand him the keys for 90 minutes. What set Carlin apart was functionality. He was relaxed, altered, but razor-sharp. "We called him a functioning herbalist," joked a staffer. The weed didn't slow him down. It focused him. Carson leaned into it, asking open-ended questions and letting Carlin wander into philosophical, hilarious monologues. Carlin later confirmed it himself, writing, "Was I stoned during my Carson appearances? Of course. It was the 70s. I was George Carlin. Do the math." But while Carlin stayed in control, the next guest showed how quickly brilliance could turn unstable. Richard Pryor, genius on the edge. The Carlin was controlled, Richard Pryor was volatile. "He'd start brilliant," recalled a stage manager. Then suddenly his eyes would change, like he'd gone somewhere else. Johnny had to steer the conversation like a traffic cop. Pryor's cocaine use escalated through the late 70s, and several Tonight Show appearances captured that descent in real time. During one 1978 interview, Pryor began a childhood story that slowly unraveled into disconnected thoughts. The audience laughed nervously. "You could see Johnny shift into protection mode," the stage manager said. "Quick redirect, joke to cover it, then straight to commercial." Carson never exploited Pryor's vulnerability. He adored Richard's genius, an NBC executive explained. He worried about him. Sometimes he'd check on him after rough appearances. With Pryor, Carson walked a tightrope, letting brilliance fly while building a safety net beneath it. But Carson's patience had limits, as one literary legend soon discovered. Truman Capote, a televised meltdown. Truman Capote's January 1980 appearance remains one of the most infamous in Tonight Show history. "Completely baked," a production assistant summarized. Capote slurred, nodded off, snapped awake, and barely formed sentences. The control room panicked. "We kept cutting to Johnny," a sound tech recalled. "At least he was coherent." Carson tried to salvage the segment, simplifying questions, tightening smiles, but backstage fury followed. The moment they cut to commercial, Johnny exploded. His producer revealed. "Never again," he said. Capote wasn't relaxed or loose, he was incapacitated. "That crossed the line," an executive explained. Johnny tolerated enhancement, not disrespect. Capote was quietly banned. Cheech and Chong, no hiding it. Some guests made zero effort to disguise their state. Cheech Marin and Tommy Chong didn't need to. "That's just how they showed up," laughed a segment producer. Carson played the straight man, feigning innocence and letting their stoner logic unravel naturally. "He acted square on purpose," a writer said. "It made them funnier." The audience was in on the joke, and Carson let it breathe. Peter Fonda, Easy Rider, Impossible Television. By 1970, Peter Fonda wasn't just an actor, he was a symbol. Easy Rider had turned him into the cinematic face of the counterculture. A soft-spoken rebel whose calm exterior masked a deep immersion in psychedelic philosophy. But that cultural symbolism became a liability the night he appeared on The Tonight Show in a state that left even seasoned staffers rattled. From the moment Fonda walked out, something felt off. His movements were slow yet unfocused, his gaze drifting toward the studio lights as if they were alive. "He wasn't drunk," recalled a longtime cameraman. "This was something else." His pupils were massive. He looked like he was seeing things we weren't. Johnny Carson opened with a routine question about Fonda's recent projects, expecting a standard promotional answer. Instead, Fonda paused far too long, then began speaking about time as a circular force, suggesting that the past, present, and future were happening simultaneously. The audience laughed uncertainly, unsure whether this was intentional philosophical banter or something going seriously wrong. Behind the cameras, panic set in. Segment producers whispered urgently. The director began switching to wider shots to minimize the intensity of Fonda's expressions. "We all knew," said a control room technician. "This man was tripping hard." Carson adapted instantly. His questions became simpler, shorter, and safer. Gone were open-ended prompts. In their place came yes or no questions designed to anchor Fonda back to reality. But it wasn't enough. When Fonda began describing consciousness as a wave that humans merely ride until death releases them back into the universe, Carson made the call. He tapped his cue cards twice. Commercial. Immediately, the interview ended barely 5 minutes into what was scheduled to be a full segment. When the show returned, Carson continued without explanation. An act of television triage that preserved the show's flow and spared Fonda further exposure. What's remarkable is what happened afterward. Carson wasn't angry. He wasn't mocking. "Everybody has off nights," he reportedly told staff. Fonda was quietly invited back years later, sober, coherent, and professional. Carson believed in second chances, provided dignity could be restored. Oliver Reed. When intoxication turns dangerous. If Peter Fonda represented cosmic confusion, Oliver Reed represented something far more alarming: volatility. Reed arrived in 1975 already notorious for his hard-drinking reputation. British tabloids had long chronicled his barroom brawls and public meltdowns. Still, Carson believed in giving people a fair shot. That belief would be tested within minutes. Reed slurred his first answer. By the second, he was interrupting Johnny. By the third, he was shouting. He wasn't playful drunk, recalled the stage manager. He was aggressive drunk. That's a whole different animal. Reed began mocking questions, veering off topic, growing louder. At one point, he stood up unprompted and began demonstrating a mock fighting stance, fists raised. Security staff edged closer to the stage. The audience laughed nervously, sensing the shift from comedy to risk. Carson's demeanor changed instantly. He sat straighter. His voice firmed. He interrupted Reed repeatedly, something Carson almost never did. When Reed refused to settle, Carson cut the segment short on air, steering forcefully into a break. Backstage, the verdict was swift and final. "He's done," Carson said. Oliver Reed was permanently banned from The Tonight Show, not because he was drunk, but because he crossed Carson's one unbreakable line: threatening unpredictability. Carson could manage chaos. He would not tolerate danger. Sammy Davis Jr. Fueled, focused, and untouchable. Sammy Davis Jr.'s 1974 appearance exists in a different category altogether. Not a meltdown, not a disaster, but a mystery that has fueled decades of speculation. That night, Davis was electric. He spoke rapidly, jumped between stories, laughed loudly, sweated under the lights, and radiated an almost superhuman energy. "It was like someone turned the speed up on Sammy," recalled a sound technician. But here's the thing, he never missed a beat. Industry insiders knew the signs. Cocaine was everywhere in mid-1970s entertainment. No one said it out loud, but whispers filled the green room. Long bathroom visits, hyperfocus, relentless momentum. Carson handled Davis differently than any other guest on this list. He didn't slow him down. He matched him. Johnny allowed Davis to dominate the segment, only nudging the conversation when necessary. He laughed, reacted, and let the performance breathe. When they cut to commercial, Carson wiped his brow and joked, "I feel like I need oxygen after that." The difference? Sammy delivered. "He was a professional to the core," said a former talent coordinator. Whatever was powering him, it didn't derail the show. It elevated it. That's why Davis was welcomed back again and again. Carson didn't care about rumors. He cared about results. Johnny Carson's balancing act. Taken together, these moments reveal something essential about Johnny Carson. He was not a moral referee. He was a television craftsman. Carson operated on what his staff called an impairment spectrum. Functional and entertaining? Welcome. Unfocused but manageable? Protected. Incoherent? Disrespectful? Or dangerous? Cut off. He didn't judge the substance, explained a former producer. He judged the performance. Carson believed his job was to protect 3 things. 1. The audience. 2. The show. 3. The guest's dignity. When possible, he guided impaired guests gently, steering them away from embarrassment. When that failed, he acted decisively. This approach built immense loyalty. Many guests later admitted they felt safer with Carson than any other host, even on their worst nights. Why this could never happen today? In today's social media-driven culture, these appearances would explode instantly, clipped, analyzed, canceled, and endlessly replayed. But Carson's era existed in a different media ecosystem. There was no Twitter, no viral outrage cycle, no permanent digital record. Carson controlled the narrative in real time. If he treated an incident as minor, history followed his lead. That power, combined with his empathy, is why The Tonight Show remained the safest stage in America, even when guests arrived high as a kite. Carson understood something timeless. Television isn't about perfection. It's about managing imperfection without humiliation. That philosophy is why Johnny Carson didn't just survive the wildest era in entertainment history. He mastered it.